Good evening, colleagues. Before we begin today's important deliberations, I must first acknowledge the devastating events that have unfolded in Manchester. The attack has shocked us all, and our thoughts are with the victims, their families, and the entire community as they face unimaginable grief and disruption. As public servants, we are reminded, especially in moments like this, of our duty to uphold the values of compassion, resilience, and unity. Let us hold space for those affected and reaffirm our commitment to safeguarding the well-being of our communities through thoughtful, transparent governance. Turning to the business before us, this call-in meeting reflects the seriousness with which we approach scrutiny. The decision on the review carries significant implications for local governance reform, and it's our responsibility to examine it with rigor, fairness, and clarity. I thank all members for their preparation and engagement, and officers for the work in getting this meeting on the agenda tonight. Let's proceed with empathy in our heart and purpose in our mind. Thank you. Apologies for absence. Steve.
So I'm substituting for Hazel tonight.
Councillor Turpin.
Thank you. I'm subbing for Councillor Pearce.
Thank you. Can I sign the record of the meeting held on the 21st of August 2025 as correct? I have no urgent matters. Are there any declaration of DPR or other interests or any declarations of whipping? I would like to thank members again for attending this special meeting. The matter tonight is to discuss the calling of Cabinet Decisions 133 and 134, 2025, which refer to local government reorganization. The committee will need to decide to do one of the following. One, accept the Cabinet decision and take no further action. Two, refer the decision back to Cabinet for consideration, setting out its reasons for doing so. Or three, refer the decision to full council for consideration. I'd just like to set out the process for the meeting. First of all, I will ask the leader of the opposition, Councillor Perfect, to set out his reason for the call-in. I would then ask the leader of the council to provide his views on behalf of the cabinet before opening the debate to members of the committee. But first, I will ask Bhupinder Gill, Assistant Director, Legal and Governance, to introduce the report. Bhupinder.
Thank you, Chairperson. I will keep this introduction even briefer than my normal brief introductions. Members will have read the report and familiar with the decisions that have been called in, as you, Chairperson, have already indicated, 133 and 134 of this year, and the decision by the Cabinet to progress the Medway option for local government reorganisation, which is known as option 4D, to a full business case, and to engage external support, namely KPMG and others if necessary, in order to support the development of that business case. Members are fully conversant with the government's directives and initiatives in terms of local government reorganisation and their approach to a significant number of regions within the country in order to present their proposals. Proposals have to be submitted by the 28th of November this year, and that's a very tight time frame. Local leaders and chief executives meet on a regular basis, and they started off with a long list of 10 possible options, which have now been whittled down to 2. And one of those is a 3 unitary model reorganisation of local government within Kent, and another one is for 4 unitaries. The Medway option is a variation or a different options proposed for the 4 unitary model. The report sets out the technical rationale behind the decision making. What I'd particularly want to draw members' attention to today is paragraph 5 in the cover report, which is the comments made by me in my capacity as monitoring officer and by the local authorities 151 officer. We're both of the view that the decision that was taken by Cabinet, in fact both decisions taken by Cabinet, fall within the policy framework and are both within budget, and therefore we would ask members to take that into consideration when coming to a view as to what their recommendation will be once they've heard from the Leader of the Council. Unless there's any further questions, I don't propose to take up any more of your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhupinder. I will now call on the Leader of the Opposition, Councillor Perfect.
Thank you, Chairperson. And firstly, can I second everything that you said in terms of thanking officers for the preparation of this evening's meeting, and also the Leader of the Council for ensuring, as the portfolio holder, that he was available in order to attend. I will shortly set out our reasoning for setting out the call-in relation to decisions 133 and 134 of 2025, following a meeting of the Cabinet held last week. The call-in is obviously in my name, but carries the support of both the full Conservative group and also indeed my shadow cabinet, following a recent meeting of both groups. Within Appendix C, in which I addressed the Leader of the Council following the recent cabinet meeting, sets out in particular the 3 principal concerns that the opposition have in relation to the decision that was taken in relation to progression of the Medway option in relation to local government reorganisation, and I will summarise those again now. The first is in relation to financial prudence. The Council is in a severe state of financial distress, which has necessitated the use of exceptional financial support, which was granted by the Secretary of State, which is required in setting the budget for 2024 to 5, further topped up following alongside the 2025 to 2026 budget. On the 29th of July 2025, Cabinet considered the Round 1 revenue monitoring for this financial year, which showed an additional pressure of 10.9 million, with the Council's reserves standing at around 10 million, meaning that the Council would not be able to fund the overspend of the scale currently expected. Accordingly, the Cabinet instructed the corporate management team to work to implement urgent actions to bring expenditure back within the budget agreed by full Council, which was set out as a policy position, Cabinet Decision 99 of 2025. While the commissioning of the report, which the Monitoring Officer and Section 151 Officer have laid out, is within the policy framework and the budget that was agreed by Council in February, we are of the view that if this report was not commissioned, this would count as a saving towards the Council's overall financial position. There is also the consequence, in addition to the overall budget and policy position, that this will require officer time and capacity, which further adds to the forecasted cost that this report could possibly add to the Council's budget. This report is, in our opinion, by no means necessary, and given the extreme financial distress that the Council is currently facing, the 2 options that are being considered by the strategic partner following the decision of Kent leaders includes an option for 4 councils. Therefore, the spend on this report, we are of the view, would effectively be contributing to the Council's overspend and is therefore in need of further scrutiny. The second reason for our call-in is the change of strategic direction. Through the Member Working Group on Local Government Reorganisation and Devolution, the opposition have worked pragmatically with the administration and officers on local government reorganisation, as we believe that this is in the best interests of the people of Medway. The strategic programme for us was always clear, that being that Kent leaders would choose 2 options that would then be considered by the strategic partner, and the administration would then likely back one of these options, which would be sent to government. The administration was clear that it would pursue a 4 unitary option. Both of these facts were established in Cabinet meetings earlier in this calendar year in Decision 33 of 2025 and 35 of 2025. However, at a very late stage on the 13th of August, the administration announced a new 4-unitary map at the Kent Leaders meeting, which was subsequently shared with Medway councillors and the press shortly afterwards. I would add that this map was not developed with the involvement of any other Kent councils, despite making changes to their existing borough and district boundaries, bypassed the internal working group, was not consulted nor discussed with other partners of the council, and was presented, in our opinion, extremely late, given the timelines that I previously set out. The map was then met by condemnation by other Kent leaders and was subsequently rejected by other Kent leaders at a meeting earlier in September, with the original 4-unitary option, which the administration, we understand, previously supported, and a 3-unitary option being progressed. Subsequently to this, then on the 13th of September, to an update to the forward plan, the administration announced that they would continue to pursue the map announced on the 13th of August. However, we are still unclear as to why there were no contingencies or thought around this had ever been discussed when the map was announced on the 13th of August. We are therefore concerned that the strategic direction around local government reorganisation has changed from Cabinet Decisions 33 and 35 of 2025, and we are of the view that this is currently appearing extremely chaotic and without any overarching plan. The third reason for our call-in pertains to the scope and nature of the business case. Following on from point 2, we are concerned that even if the administration decided to proceed, ignoring the concerns I have set out within the first 2 items that we just discussed, there is still a lack of clarity about the scope and nature of this plan. Any business case that is submitted must be implementable with a business case that makes clear recommendations, given how consequential these changes will be. We are concerned that this being pursued at the pace that it is, without support from other Kent councils, could mean that any business case produced would be likely unsatisfactory and likely unimplementable, and we are not satisfied that the responses set out in this report, or indeed the Cabinet report from last month, strengthens or deals with this argument. We therefore also are of the opinion that this could be further damaging to the Council's overall reputation, and therefore we are of the view that this was in need of further scrutiny. The opposition completely respect the administration's right to pursue its option for local government reorganisation in line with the guidance from the department. However, given the levels of public money as I've set out involved, along with the Council's extremely distressed financial position, we are therefore of the view that this call-in is justified and necessary. In relation to point 1, I note that the leader made comments following the release of this call-in in the press regarding other councils, Conservative-led in some cases, pursuing their own option. The consequence is that a number and the majority of these councils are not in exceptional financial support and the extreme financial distress that this council is in. And a number of those councils did set out, coming to my second point, a contingency plan around their own options prior to releasing a map a month earlier. Therefore, we were in a united view as a Conservative group there was a necessity to enact a call-in for decisions 133 and 134, as I have just set out. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Councillor Purford. I will ask the leader to speak on behalf of the Cabinet. 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And can I start by offering on behalf of the people of Medway and following your comments at the start of the meeting, our thoughts and solidarity with the people of Manchester. I've been in contact with Bev Craig, the leader of Manchester Council, earlier today. And I've also, from a local perspective, been in touch both with Kent Police and also Chatham Synagogue to ensure there's additional protections and safeties there. I know every single member of this council would want to hear that reassurance, and I send, I'm sure, a united, fully supported position to say our thoughts are with Manchester. No attack like this should ever happen, and we need to make sure that we do all that we can collectively to support our community moving forward. On to the main business of tonight. Let me say a few things in start. Firstly, look, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reflect and review where we are with local government. And I can tell you the process we're going through already has been incredibly collaborative, supportive, both from a local level. I think the cross-party working group has done a good piece of work, and indeed at a regional level with all 14 council chief executives and council leaders working collaboratively. Doesn't mean we agree on everything, and that's absolutely fine and appropriate. But as others have heard me say here, we can disagree agreeably. There was a good opportunity, and I was pleased to see many members of the opposition group come to our last cabinet meeting. Some of the language I wouldn't have used. I don't think this is a vanity project. I think this is about making sure that we've got a suitable set of local authority boundaries for the future, probably 50 plus years, as we've seen previously from the last iteration in the 70s. But it is right and appropriate to ask those questions. And again, absolutely the entitlement of the opposition to use the democratic processes we have tonight. From my perspective, I'm very clear. Let me talk through the issues that are laid out. And I want to thank the Leader of the Opposition for his letter to me explaining the 3 reasons why. Obviously, we are in a tricky financial situation. No one is more aware of that than myself. But we are working through our financial improvement and transformation plan. That is seeing good positive progress being made. I'm hopeful, as I've said elsewhere, and we are working towards trying to get to the February 2026 budget meeting without use of additional exceptional financial support. Not every council in the country has that ambition who has been in these circumstances. We certainly have. So, of course, every spend is important. And again, if we were in a situation where we're having to use other budgets from other areas, I think this would be a more legitimate question to be put today. We have a budget. It was voted on. The majority of council voted for that budget. Not everybody did, but the majority of the council did. And therefore, we're using existing budgets to move this process forward of local government reorganisation. Worth saying as well, as we move on to perhaps bullet point 2, and this is where I think we just need some absolute clarity. The Leader of the Opposition and his group and his party on the whole across the region have been clear. Not every single member of their party, but most have been clear that they support a 3 option. Most of my party, but not all of my party, have supported a 4 option. As you can see from the process we've gone through so far, by the nature of these things, and again, we're not doing this in isolation. If you look across the country, there are lots of examples where 3, 4, 5, 6 different submissions have been made. A lot of councils, of course, had to make submissions just last week for those who are in the earlier tranche. So I have always been clear, I think 4 is the best option, but I haven't ever said until recently what 4 is the best option. Because even until we brought forward the option known as 4D, there were in that case 3 different alternative 4 models, all of which have different emphasis and views. So it is right to say we've been clear as Medway, pretty clear throughout actually. We were likely to come forward with our own option. We've done that. We've done that work in-house. That was done particularly using the expertise of David Holloway, who's got outstanding background and knowledge in this sort of area. So I welcome that, and again, that's what was taken forward. There is always a challenge when you've got a situation like this, when you need to communicate with people. We took a decision of the approach we took, both from a political perspective, but also through officer corps across the councils and elsewhere. There could have been alternative ways of doing that, and that's I completely accept. There is no right and wrong way of communicating that at the time, but we wanted to make sure that certainly all 59 councils here were aware before it was in the public domain, and we managed to manage that just about. But there isn't a right and wrong way. But I'm very clear that this is our map. What that has triggered, absolutely, both with members of the public, council leaders, and indeed other parts of the system, if you will, is a conversation to say, actually, we like your broad premise, but actually, can we talk about a bit of refinement, a bit of nuancing here? Those conversations are happening. And of course, what we will do through the work that we're doing, subject to today's agreement with KPMG, obviously subject to the democratic processes, as we will be looking at that as well. So by the nature of these things, and of course, of the models that are currently on the table, 3 of those are pretty broad brush. 3 using existing boundaries, 4 using existing boundaries, and 1 map, which I think probably shouldn't be going forward, but that's a matter for that council, because it means it won't be able to be compliant with devolution, which is important for this process. So from that perspective, there is further work before we bring forward finally what will come to both council and ultimately to cabinet. And from that perspective, that leads us into point 3. This is absolutely implementable. KPMG, of course, who we are doing the work across the region, our option 4D, and I think this is in the public domain. I'm not sure if this has been shared, but I'm very happy that it's shared if needs be. Looking at all of the options at the point, the 7 options, our option 4D, the highest ranking for establishing a single tier of local government. Our option 4D, the highest ranking of stronger community engagement and neighbourhood empowerment. That's comparing it with the other 6 options which are on the table. Now, of course, some of those won't go forward. I think, again, subject to tonight, I think it's a fair working assumption that government will receive 5 sets of maps. I think that's a reasonable working assumption. But there, and if you're advocating for another one, you will go, yeah, but what about this box here? That's the nature of these sorts of conversations. So from my perspective, I'm happy with where we are. It was disappointing that not all colleagues supported putting forward more than 2, and that was the question that was put. And that's a reasonable conversation, but that was done through consensus. It wasn't rejected, it wasn't slammed, all of the kind of hyperbole language, which is, again, not necessarily by people in this room, but by others. That's not what happened. Kent Leaders doesn't work like that, actually. It is generally a consensus approach on not just this issue, but all issues. So I'll probably pause there, Chairperson, and again, happy to take any questions as we go through. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maple. Any member? Councillor MacDonald.
Chair, I'm quite happy for Councillor Atwood to go first, because straight after Vince, if you wanted to. We both went up at the same time. Go on, I'll go after you, Gary.
Thank you. Thank you, Vince, for your explanation, and thank you, George, for your reasons for calling. A couple of questions I may. You know I asked the question at Cabinet, and along the similar vein. You know our group did not support the budget proposal, and especially the line in the budget for the amount of money to be spent on government reorganisation. If you remember back to the budget meeting, we had a different number that we proposed. So we think there was too much money going to be put in the budget for that, and we felt it could be dealt with a different way, with secondments, etc., but also recognising we needed some leadership in that role. So that's the first point, that we didn't agree with putting that much money in the budget in the first place. The second point I'd like to raise is, in the papers it mentions that there's the lack of recruitment speed, if that has left some money in the budget, and also one of the posts has not been filled. So I'd like to know exactly how much you think putting option 4D will cost the taxpayers of Medway, because at the moment that's a potential saving, and could lead to lower council tax for residents, because we're not going to be spending so much money, less EFS. So I'd like to know exactly how much, because you must have worked it out. If you know there's enough money in the budget line to pay for it, how much are you going to spend on this project that is not necessary, because there is 2 proposals already agreed with Kent Leaders going forward within the £514,000 given to us by government to take two forward. So I think that's the most important thing. And we must say that every other budget line that we have in a long budget line paper, we are being asked, all officers, to look at anywhere they can save money to try and get back to a balanced budget. This is an ideal opportunity to say, actually, we've got some money in the budget we don't need to spend, because we've already got 2 options that were agreed by a consensus decision to go forward. So that would be a good saving for Medway Council, and hopefully less EFS. So that's just those sort of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hogwarts. Councillor Maple, would you like to respond?
I'm very happy to. I may look to Richard and Bhupinder on the finances. There's some broad brush figures, but I'm not sure through the most recent preliminary conversations, obviously all subject to tonight and where the process ends up. But I know there's some initial conversations and some initial figures were provided actually at the date of decision around the process that was done by all 14 councils. Absolutely recognise and respect that there were differences in the different budget lines. the Labour and Cooperative Group didn't propose 37 random redundancies. So from that perspective, there were different lines, and I respect that the Conservative opposition group didn't vote for the budget. On the issue of recruitment speed and the wider issue around the team, perhaps, I think it's worth saying, because one of the legitimate questions, all questions are legitimate, one of the legitimate questions tonight could be, well, why are KCC doing it in-house and we're having to bring in expertise? And actually that goes to the heart of the matter of actually why that budget was first created, because actually they have got huge levels of staffing, which means that they can quite easily take on a difficult technical process. This is not a straightforward, respectfully to everyone who produces, cabinet reports and council reports, this is technical detail. We know from the submissions last week for the rest of the country, which have gone on the earlier deadline, some of those submissions are over 200 pages long. So they're technical, they're complex, and they're not something we do every quarter or every year. So KCC think they can do that by themselves. I wish them well. I don't support their map, but I wish them well in that process. We simply haven't got the capacity, even with the new staffing levels that we've brought in, because that was frankly to deal with the fact that particularly our senior team, so I pay tribute to Richard, Bhupinder, to Leanne, and to Phil, and others, but those four in particular who are at a number of meetings, a number of conversations, they've got a council to run as well. So that's where that additional budget was originally proposed. You are right to say, actually, recruitment can just sometimes be a challenge. And actually, I remember before May 2023, we had conversations in the past where roles were proposed, and actually 9 months into the budget year, that was still a vacancy. That just happens sometimes. It's not anyone's fault. So I think that's where we've ended up with this particular year. It's the first year of that budget line. It's a moving real-time feast. And so from my perspective, I'm comfortable with where we are. And officers will tell you my first question was absolutely, with the proposed figures that KPMG put forward to us, which we are still considering, can we do that within the existing budget? And the answer was very clearly yes. I think if the answer had been no, we may have had to look at how we move forward. But thankfully, we are where we are, to use that cliche. So I'm comfortable with where we are. But perhaps Richard or Bhupinder may want to come on specifically on the budget. Thank you.
Richard, would you like to contribute?
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, Leader. So to be clear, in terms of the costs, there was a schedule that was taken to the meeting of Kent leaders on the 3rd of September, as the Leader has alluded to. So clearly within the arrangements for that discussion, it was envisaged that there would be further work, the potential for further work on additional business cases. And the cost is £105,000 for that additional work. That is the same cost that actually Gravesham and Dartford will be bearing for the additional work that's being undertaken on Model 5A. If I can just be clear about some of the wider funding as well, if that's okay, Chairperson. So as members are aware, we were allocated, the region was allocated £514,000 by government to support the work on local government reorganisation, and the two proposals that were agreed at the meeting of leaders on the 3rd of September, the work on those business cases is funded out of that government allocation of £514,000. Any other further proposals that progress will be subject to those charges from KPMG, and that's the cost to us. That is the cost that will be applied to Gravesham and Dartford as well. As the Leader has said, Kent County Council are undertaking work themselves on their business case, albeit there will be a requirement, I think, even for Kent County Council to have some additional capacity support provided by KPMG to support their work, which would also be charged. If I could, Chairperson, as well, just pick up the point around recruitment. I think the points are well made, of course. The budget was set in February, but the budget only comes into effect from the 1st of April. We moved pretty swiftly to start to recruit the team, but of course there are lead times. You've got to advertise the post, you then got to interview. There are then notice periods that are given as well. So I think it's quite understandable that there's been a bit of a delay in terms of getting that team up to speed. Hope that's helpful, Chairperson and members. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you content?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that 105,000 is a lot of money that we haven't got, and we shouldn't be spending it, in my opinion, for something that isn't necessary.
Thank you, Councillor Hawker. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I think, yeah, unusually for me, I've written stuff down because I'm probably going to repeat, and thank you, Leader, for setting the same thing out you've kept doing again, which you've had to keep repeating. And I suppose I'm going to reiterate it again this evening. But, Chair, I respect the right of colleagues to call in decisions for scrutiny. Of course I do. That's part of our democratic process, and I think we should always value that. But I just want to be clear from the start, from what I've read of the report as well, the Cabinet's decision is not about breaking away, right? It's not about turning our backs on partnership. I haven't read that anywhere on any of the reports that I've read. And it's certainly not about wasting public money. It is about doing our duty as elected representatives of Medway Council, which we all are here. And it's a unique, obviously, urban authority with a strong identity. And it's a future that we're all here to help shape. That's the way I see it. That's what our job is. And what I saw was agreed by Cabinet was simple and sensible. It was to develop a fully costed, fully scoped business case so that Medway has a voice. And also an option in the discussions about how local government may be reorganised in Kent in the future. But I just want to remind this committee, Chair, that this decision does not commit Medway to reorganisation. It does not change our strategic direction, and it does not spend, as we've already said, money outside of agreed budgets. In fact, the funding comes from an existing allocation, as we've already said just now, and thank you for that, Chief Executive, for that clarification. And to me, that's financial prudence in action, not financial recklessness, okay, because it's already in the budget. And some have claimed, as I've heard, and I will hear it again tonight, I'm sure, that this is a departure from our collective approach. But as the report makes absolutely clear, and you've heard again this evening, other councils are doing it, and we've heard it, haven't we? KCC, Gravesham, and Dartford, possibly. And they've all publicly acknowledged that as well, so that they may pursue them business cases. So why, I ask, should Medway be the only one to be told to sit quiet on the sidelines? Are we to have less ambition than our neighbours, maybe? Or are we to let others decide our future without even putting forward a case of our own? The Medway model, from what I've seen, is based on outdated boundaries. And we know it's from the 70s. We've seen it. And Councillor Perfect, we've seen it. We've been on the groups. We've seen all of that. But our model is based on the modern infrastructure, real communities and future-facing principles laid out by the government. And it reflects who we are today, not from the 70s, who we are today and where we are going tomorrow. That's the way I read this report and from the Cabinet. And I don't believe that this is about isolation. I believe it's about information. And to me, information is what matters. In all the reports we read and everything we decide on, we have to read that information. And when Whitehall looks to Kent, Medway must have our own evidence, our own proposals, and hopefully our own voice on that table. We should. I strongly believe we should. And what is being called in tonight is not a final decision. It is the first step of us being ready. A business case is not a commitment. It's a tool to assess our feasibility to go forward. That's what I believe, Chair. So I ask colleagues on the committee tonight at this late hour, why would you block the creation of a business case before you've even seen it? It doesn't make sense to me. You haven't even seen the business case and we're attempting to block it. And what are you afraid of? Is it that it might make absolute complete sense and it might be a really good business case? Is that what you're afraid of tonight? And Chair, we can't make responsible decisions, can we, on this committee? We do a lot of work on this committee and we can't make responsible decisions if we are denied the evidence to make them. So this calling to me is not in the interest of transparency, it's not in the interest of accountability, and it's certainly not in the interest of the people of Medway. This, in my view, is not scrutiny, it's an attempt at sabotage. And I believe we should move forward, do the work, get the facts, and then we know what's on the table and we can make a mature, informed decision for the good of Medway for the future, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Turpin.
Thank you, Chair. I've been quite sort of torn on this issue and this sort of call-in in particular. I think Councillor MacDonald, you put some very important points across there, and I think, you know, as elected members of Medway, as we currently are, you know, we have to put our residents of Medway first, and we have to do what's best by them. I think, you know, 105,000, when you look at it on our council's budget as a whole, is a small amount, and I don't say that lightly because it's £105,000. It's a lot of money, and we have to be careful about every penny that we spend. So, you know, I'm not dismissing that, but I think it is, you know, it is important to look at options that are, you know, best for our residents going forward. So I think what I'd like to hear this evening, so I appreciate I don't sort of sit on business support, so maybe I missed some of this, and I'd like to understand it, and I think for the sake of our residents, we'd like to have a better understanding of this. I don't think I've read this from the report, but forgive me if it is there, is kind of what are the differences? Why are we we're not just putting forward 4D because we think it's a prettier map, you know, that you've got strong reasons for doing that. You know, when you do look at just the maps, it doesn't look hugely different to, you know, maybe some of the others. So I think it's important for residents to know, you know, if taxpayers' money is being spent, why is this 4D option, do you think is important? What has it got that the others haven't got? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turpin. Councillor Maple, would you like to respond?
I'll come back on both of those, thank you. To go to Elizabeth first, and I'll go to Dan. So why 4D? So a couple of bits, really. This is about righting some of the wrongs that were there from the 1970s. If you speak to people in Faversham, for example, they do not look to either Sittingbourne or indeed Medway for most things. In some cases they look to Maidstone, in some cases they look to Canterbury. So that's one example. And actually, since this has been out there in the public domain, and again, we were always going to start a conversation with this, what's been interesting actually on some of, I've got to get off social media, but on some of the Gravesend Facebook groups, for example, where this has been talked about, I think your deputy leader may have shared it on some of those groups. Lots of residents have said, actually, I live in Gravesham, but I look to Borough Green. I don't go to Gravesend. So actually, for those residents, our map will make more sense. And again, I'm not basing a whole process on one Facebook post, for example, but using that as kind of anecdotal information. The process, of course, ultimately, and this is why we need the work to be done, the detailed business plan will go into really granular detail around travel to work, education, all of the kind of things that make up a community. So there are nuances, and of course, we've talked a lot about perhaps the Faversham and Gravesham changes, but also at the other end of the county as well. Again, speaking to some people in Folkestone and Hythe, the changes there make absolute sense to them. Again, 50 plus years ago, some people will go, well, actually, why were those things put together? That doesn't make sense. Actually, they both look the other way. We're trying to deal with that. And again, we're in a situation now where actually there will be some refinements as a result of those conversations. And by the nature of our map, and to a degree, the Gravesham-Dartford option, because it's not just taking 13 blobs and putting them together, there are nuances in there. It does open up those conversations. So I think that will be critical as we move forward. Your point around residents is really important. You know, we're all here for the residents that we represent. We all want to make sure whatever happens at the end of this process, that they've got a council that they can understand. Of course, it's worth recognising that for us in our area, actually, it won't look and feel that different at the moment. the people of Strood Rural will phone you or John or Gary, and that will be it. If Strood Rural was in Gravesham, they would phone you, John or Gary for some services, and then potentially a different set of councillors for some other services. So for the rest of Kent, this will feel quite different. I would say better, because I've always been an advocate for unitary authorities. Others aren't, and that's fine. I disagree with them agreeably. So yeah, I think it will, for residents in Medway, actually, it will feel slightly more nuanced than actually the big change that is happening to the other 1.6 million residents across the region. On Dan's points, I think absolutely right to recognise we haven't walked away. Richard was there. I said that, you know, almost jokingly, everyone's still on my Christmas card list. You know, if you think about Kent leaders, particularly since May, it is the most politically diverse set of 14 politicians you could probably drag into a room. Independents, Greens, Lib Dems, Tories, Labour, Reform, all in one room. And actually on this issue, and trains going to Europe, we're in pretty much consensus that we need to do something on this. Something will look and feel different. And we had the ignition, you might hear the phrase the ignition meeting reference. That's again where all chief executive and all council leaders came together, spent a whole day together. There was no falling, well, yeah, almost no falling out. There was no falling out. And actually, it was really good. We talked a lot about devolution, actually, at that session as well, because again, as colleagues here will know, for me, this is a milestone to get hold of those resources and powers to change our community for the better. You're right to say this is about the next 50 years. Absolutely agree with you. And people will have different views on that. So again, I respect that some people will say, actually, 3 councils makes sense. I just think if you look at the numbers, you know, where we are today and where we will be in 50 years' time, those are substantial councils, far, far away from the community. And I'm actually talking about other councils. We've had some helpful conversations with other council leaders since this has happened. Worth reminding colleagues that obviously they're executive decisions, but I think every one of the 14 councils like us is having a council meeting beforehand. And those council meetings, regardless of what the council leader did at the Kent Leaders meeting, however they voted, doesn't matter. Those meetings, basically you'll have 6 options, which will be support any one of the 5 maps. So I'll pick someone at random. David might go, I think one council for the whole of Kent is a really good idea. He would be able to bring that to the table. And we had a really good conversation at our cross-party governance meeting around, it's going to be a very unusual meeting, but actually there's only really 6 options, one of the 5 maps or do nothing. I would never support do nothing because that means it's absolutely in the hands of everybody else. But that would be a legitimate position for an individual or political group to put forward. But I won't be voting for it for the avoidance of doubt. So that is right. But again, you know, a council that isn't KCC, Gravesham and Dartford or Medway can vote for one of our 3 plans. Absolutely they can do. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that happening, but time will tell. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maple. Councillor Perfect.
Thank you, Chairperson. Look, I mean, I think there's lots of great assertions being made here. I mean, about a number of things which I'm not sure are particularly borne out in reality. I think Councillor MacDonald's probably a bit misguided on this. It's not the Medway plan, it's the administration's plan. I think I don't see anything here that this has been built with residents in Medway. I don't see the people of parts of Medway that are going to be moved into other parts of Kent necessarily saying that they're in support of it, and I haven't seen any evidence to back that up at all. Just coming to the sort of second point about the levels of support here. Obviously, we've got again more anecdotal evidence, Leader. I mean, I'm not understanding if there's all of this wonderful support we've got in Folkestone and Hythe, in Gravesham. Your Labour colleague John Burden doesn't support it, so I'm not sure he would agree with that. It would have come through. If there was the support of other councils in Kent, this would have been progressed by Kent leaders and have been funded under the government's model. And that comes on to the point that I really wanted to make, really, listening to some of the debate in here, is about the point about contingencies. I think there's been a number of key errors that I think it's actually clear from this meeting that have happened. I think, first of all, the mistake of not meeting with other Kent leaders and discussing. You didn't have to discuss the whole map, no, but you could have discussed some of the changes that you were planning on making. And it should be said that this map, compared to the other models, is the only one I can see that is progressed enough that it is making significant changes to other parts of the county without any discussion with any of those other parties. And of course, the anecdotal evidence that's being provided that people support it on Facebook, I'm afraid to me, doesn't provide me with reassurance that an authority requiring exceptional financial support of over, in the tens of millions over the last 2 financial years, needs to spend £105,000 on a report when doesn't appear to be any public support, as referenced by the Kent Online, by any other council leader. So, I mean, if the leader wants to correct that, I'm happy to be corrected.
I will come back in on that. I don't think there's any public support for any of the 7 options at the moment, which are now probably going to be 5, because the public haven't been asked yet. So saying there's no public support, I'm not saying we're basing a whole business model on one Facebook post for the avoidance of doubt.
No, that's reassuring.
I'm very happy to give that clarification. But the reality is that there's a little bit of work going on being driven by Canterbury, collectively just sense checking, not on individual models, but what do people know about LGR? And in many cases, it's not very much, because frankly, people are getting on with their lives. So I would respectfully say, if anyone anywhere is saying our model has great support from the public, respectfully, I don't think I'd like to know where they've got that opinion from. And I'm not saying ours has got great, huge waves of support from the public, because it's only been out there a matter of weeks. We're going through the process.
I mean, part of my question, sorry, Chairperson, part of my question is, what support have you got from other council leaders to spend £105,000? Chief Executive referenced correctly Dartford and Gravesham. Excellent leader in Jeremy Kite. Believes for the people of Dartford that that's the right model. That's his right to do that. But he has support in his neighbouring Gravesham. They're going to be, splitting any costs between the 2 authorities. I'm not seeing any support for your model from other authorities. I'm being told that people of Folkestone and Hyde support it. I'm not aware that Jim Martin's been saying that publicly. So I don't personally believe there's any support from any other council of this plan. As I say, the Kent Online reported that. I mean, I'm happy to be corrected if you believe that there are other leaders that are advocating for the model. Obviously, as you mentioned, KCC is advocating a 1, Dartford and Gravesham advocating a 5. Others, West Kent, pretty much agreed unanimously cross-party on a 3 model. Obviously, East Kent, there's some differing opinions. Not seeing anyone here advocating publicly for your model. They might do later on, of course. That's your right to do that. But I'm just questioning about if a council in exceptional financial support should be spending £105,000 developing a business case that hasn't got the support of any other councils publicly. And if we had the support of other councils, we could share that cost. We could share the £105,000 figure that the Chief Executive's referenced. And it would lessen the burden on an authority that's exceptionally financially strained, as my brilliant deputy leaders outlined. So, just to finish, Chairperson, I've got concerns about that. And just finally, I mean, it's just very chaotic. If the plan all along, when we got to the 13th of August, there appears to have been this view that this was going to have lots of support, despite the fact it wasn't built in consultation. As I've just referenced, not talking about the whole map needing to be consulted, but elements weren't consulted with other authorities when we were going to be splitting towns up that have been together for hundreds of years. If we were going to go that alone, why didn't you think about preparing the business case? Why didn't you think about the scope of that prior to needing to suddenly rush a paper to Cabinet at the end of September? So I think we've been proven why we needed to have some scrutiny around that. And as I say, just to finish, Chairperson, £105,000 has been spent, and it's not £105,000 of money that we've got, as Councillor Hackwell's referenced. It's £105,000 of borrowed money through exceptional financial support that will need to be being drawn down. Yes, we got permission from the Secretary of State, totally acknowledge that, but that's money that's going to be borrowed, and that's money that this authority is going to have to add to the debt that later on will have to be paid. Irrespective of whether or not it's in the budget, still going to be probably paid. Could be a reduction of exceptional financial support. So I just want to make those few points. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Councillor Perfect. Councillor Maple, would you like to respond?
I refer to some of the comments I made right at the start. This is a process once in a lifetime, so it is right and appropriate. And I think, to be fair to George, he's been clear historically that, you know, we've got our right as an administration to press ahead. As leader of the opposition, his team have got the right to call that decision in, give it additional scrutiny. Neither of those things are bad. They're good. They're good for democracy. Maybe not good for our sleep patterns, but that's by the by. I'd say on the support, look, ultimately, the point of support, because again, at the moment, it's a map with some information. At the end of this process, it will be a map with lots more information, and there may be nuanced refinements, as I say. That's part of the beauty of our process, which perhaps isn't available to others when you're using the existing building blocks. It would be naive to not recognise that those conversations would happen. Could things have been done earlier? Maybe. But actually, this has all been, as I think we all recognise, this has moved at pretty quick pace. So from that perspective, those conversations will continue. We're hearing from people. I had a letter earlier today, for example, from the voluntary sector across Kent and Medway to explore positively what local government reorganisation and particularly our model could mean for them. So that, again, people are engaging. That's a real-time conversation. Now, I don't know where they will feel at the end of that process, but that's a real-time conversation that's happening now. Ultimately, it will be for 14 councils to decide what they put forward. They will have 6 options, as I said earlier on. I wouldn't do nothing. I wouldn't have one council. The other 4 are all legitimate options in my view, but I have a preference, which is why we're here today. So, and just going back to the finances, because ultimately from a business support perspective, I go back to the point I made earlier on. If this was going to be out with the existing budget, I think the arguments would be stronger and more powerful. We've agreed the budget. Not everybody voted for it. I accept that entirely. But the council agreed the budget. We're working within that existing budget. And that's with the backdrop of us working through our financial improvement and transformation plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. You would like to come back, Councillor?
Yeah, just very briefly, Chairperson. I'm conscious we need to move the debate on. I mean, it is your right. I've referenced that within the letter here, within Appendix C. We're not saying that you don't have the right to do that. I think the point is, and I'll let the public decide, and we'll find out whether or not, if you decide to proceed with £105,000 worth of borrowed money in order to proceed with this plan, I very much hope that you do get some support, so it doesn't end up becoming void cost and ending up needing to go in the bin, quite frankly. But time will tell. We'll see whether or not this gets any support ahead of the 21st of November. We'll see whether or not the business case works should the committee decide to proceed with this, and we'll have to take a decision. But I mean, I am not impressed really with the decision to spend £105,000 of borrowed money on a plan that has no support from any other council in Kent. And I'm very pleased that we've got that on the record this evening, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perfect. Would you like to come back, Councillor Maple?
Obviously, decision time is November. The plans aren't there, the fully formed plans. The plan from KCC could be so remarkable that I have a Damascene moment and go, blimey, it should have been one council all along. I don't think I'm going to do that. But actually, when you get into that level of detail, and as I say, if you look at the submissions, for all of my frustrations about not being on the priority place programme, actually what we can do now is look particularly, for example, at colleagues in Sussex and Essex, both cases, a number of cases put forward. Not any part of the country have we seen a single submission. In fact, most have seen at least 3 or 4. So that would make us not unusual. And in those cases, some individual councils have taken that approach on a number of different political bases. If you think about where we are in Kent, a Reform Council, a Conservative Council, 2 Labour councils will all be proceeding with preparing their own maps alongside and plans alongside the 2 that we've done centrally as well. I say once in a lifetime opportunity means it is probably better to have all of those conversations now rather than look back in regret and go, if only we'd done that. That would have been the best outcome, both for our 292,000 residents in Medway, but also for the region of Kent too.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just having a little bit of difficulty operating my microphone, but it seems to be okay now. Of course, Councillor Maple is absolutely right to refer to the potential longevity and the seriousness of the decision that we're taking on local government reform. This is in fact the third I can remember in my lifetime. When I was a government politics student, I was around for the one in the early 70s, which the leader alluded to. I can remember very well and was active participant in the one in 1997. We have the here and now. So these things need to be got right. They are going to last for several years. They're going to affect the communities we represent. The proposal that we're looking at, the overall aim hasn't changed. We still support a four unitary Kent, but we've put forward a plan based on communities, transport links, co-terminosity with the NHS, and as has been said already this evening, we're now asking for the money for the business case to be developed, and the money is there. Councillor Perfect has repeatedly talked about £105,000 out of a total budget of millions. I don't really think, I disagree with the Conservative group on this, I don't really think this is something we should be concerned about to get this very important future of local government in Kent right. The 450k that was put into the budget is already funded. It is absolutely true that the Conservatives tried to vote this resource down, but we've had a lot of talk about democracy tonight, and that proposal was lost. And now they're objecting to us spending the money for the purpose for which it was agreed, which is bizarre. Chair, I really feel...
Sorry, thank you, Chairperson. I've just got a point of clarification. Councillor Jones keeps referring to we, and then keeps referring to a point that, that when the budget was agreed, we knew that this money was going to be spent on £105,000 worth of borrowed money was going to be spent on this report from KPMG. Can I just clarify for Councillor Jones when that was in the budget papers at the full council in February, please? Thank you.
Chair, I don't think that was a point of order, and I think Councillor Perfect, quite honestly, has had a considerable amount of airtime this evening, has been allowed to come back 3 or 4 times on questions, besides his introductory remarks. So there was a 450k figure put in the budget. The Conservatives voted to remove the resource from it, and that proposal was defeated. So, as has been said already this evening, we are where we are. It seems absolutely incredible to me that the opposition should resent spending a comparatively small amount of money in terms of the overall budget on getting local government reform for years to come, and the communities we serve properly represented, as Councillor Turpin has alluded to. Well, microphone has gone off. Somebody obviously thinks I've exceeded my minutes, but you know, it seems incredible to me that we shouldn't be able to spend the small amount of money in comparative terms on getting this process right for years to come, and I hope we'll move to a conclusion soon, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Would you like to respond, Councillor Maple?
I will do, thank you. And it follows on actually the point from Elizabeth earlier on, that actually £105,000 is a lot of money, but £105,000 in the context of a budget of more than £600 million is a relatively small amount of money. So I do think those two things need to be considered. I'm grateful for a couple of colleagues highlighting that. It's important, and again, it's not a decision we take lightly, but I think with the wider context, and again, I'm grateful for the experience of Mark when it comes to having now going through his third attempt at local government reorganisation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Medway. Councillor Brake.
Thank you, Chair. Interesting debate this evening. I begin to wonder what's been going on over the last several months, where the leaders of the authorities across Kent, which has also included Medway, exactly what has been going on. Because certainly the reports that that have been fed back to me and many others is that all is going well. You know, we're coming down to some very good ideas. Everybody's happy to sit round the table, discuss the options, and coming up with various ideas. It's only now that this has been almost put to bed, all of a sudden we got all of these splinter groups coming up with various ideas, including the one which I think is the most outlandish of all, and that's got to be KCC, where they're saying one single authority. Well, the fact is that if anybody was to suggest that, or it ever came into effect, Medway won't stand a chance, because I think the people of Kent and the people of Medway need to remember and realise why Medway became a unitary authority, and why all of us, hopefully round this the table today, represent and agree with unitary authorities. Forgive me going back to 2010-11, and when I served as Mayor of Medway, and I know that the office of Mayor is supposed to be apolitical, but the fact is that when you're in the company of mayors from right across Kent, and including Medway, and every one of those mayors actually made the point they were in envy, real envy of Medway, because they were all tied up as local authorities in what was going on in Kent. Whatever happened, whatever they wanted to do in any one of those local authorities, and I'm not going to highlight any one of them because they were all in the same boat, they hated it. They hated the fact that Medway could actually get on and do things, while Kent flipped and flapped and changed it, you name it, they did it. And everything was so tied up in bureaucracy that nothing ever happened. So unitary authorities I fully support. Believe me, if we go back to the Kent model, then I think that'll be a very bad day for everybody across Kent. But most importantly, it'll be an absolute catastrophe for Medway. That's point number one. Point number two, I look at the options 4A, 4B, 4C, 4D, and it appears to me that we're now in the business of, well, there's individual meetings going on, and I think it's quite clear that Gravesham and Dartford, for example, they're having a good old chinwag, the leaders between them and other members of their various parties, whether they be opposition or whatever, all plying with how can we best come out of this, best for them in Dartford, best for them in Gravesham, best for Swale, best for everybody. They're all doing their little bit of tallying around. Whereas I was of the view that the option that Medway was coming on board with, sorry, I thought I'd been cut off there. Yeah. But we were in the position, I thought, of coming very close to be saying, well, there's the options, 3 or 4, we'll go for it. Because at the end of the day, the people who are going to make the decisions is going to be central government, the Secretary of State. On whatever we say, on whatever we put forward, they are the ones that are going to make the final decision. And if we don't like it, I think they've made it very clear, the government of today has made it very clear, well, come the next general election, then you can make up your minds as to what you thought about what we were doing. But That's a couple of years down the line. But this evening, our really big concern is the fact that we're looking at £105,000 further overspend using borrowed money. And this is not the first time that this particular committee has sat here and discussed issues relative to finance. And we've done quite a lot of that. And we have, from this side of the local authority, the opposition, have made it very clear and have said on many occasions that your party, in making their decisions to spend money, have been agreeing to spend money on money that we do not have. You're quite happy to delve into and dig deep into the reserves that were left, being quite happy to spend money that you did not have. And that's still the case. And here we are, we're saying, well, it's only £105,000. £105,000 is an awful lot of money, and it's money that is part of what we represent, our community. And to me, it's just, don't worry, we can spend the money, borrow now, pay back later. And it's not us that are going to be paying back the 105, it's probably our grandchildren and great-children in the scope of all that's going. So this 105,000 is important, and I really do believe that this meeting tonight should in fact be referring it back to Cabinet for reconsideration. I think that is a fair and just way of doing this. 105,000 is a part of all the money that's being spent, being put forward. I think we're going to finish up, personally, my own personal view is I think we're going to finish up with the 4 unitary authority model. And it will be tweaked, of that there's no doubt. But I think the tweaking is not going to be done by us sat round here tonight. This is going to be done by central government. They're going to look at it and say, yeah, we hear what you say, Medway, hear what you say, Swale, but this is what we've decided. The model that has been put forward by yourself, Vince, and I think it was you, I'm just trying to see if I can refer back to what it was you actually said. The Medway option, which is the one that you are clearly the one that is putting forward, and that is that you wanted to tweak with just parts of our own local authority. For example, you come up with this brilliant idea, in your view anyway, that let's take the Bluebell Hill side of Tunbridge and Malling and a little bit out of Chip of Maidstone. What we can do, in fact, we will have those into Medway, but then on the other hand, let's dispose of Cuxton and Halling because, well, they don't really fit in with what we're doing, and Tunbridge and Malling can have those. So to me, and somebody who knows those areas, who knows those people, I would feel quite disgruntled, about somebody coming along to me and saying, after all these years that we've been part of Medway, City of Rochester upon Medway and everything else, all of a sudden in Cuxton and Halling, we don't want you anymore. On your bikes, go sling your hooks, go do what you want. You'll be under Tunbridge and Malling. But the people of Bluebell Hill, they also might think the same. Why do we want to be picked up with Medway? And believe me, I see that. Being a ward councillor out in Walderslade, I see it every week. The number of phone calls that I get, even after all this time of being a councillor, I have people from Maidstone and Tunbridge and Malling phoning me up, trying to burden me with a problem that's got absolutely nothing to do with me, and I have to very politely refer them back to their own local councillor. Now, I'm giving this because this is part of the overall programme that's being looked at. And what's being proposed here, in fact, is to spend a further £105,000 to do a business case, which is basically going to say, that's the Medway model, that's the one we want to go for. I'm sorry, Vince, but I can't support it, and I won't support it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. Councillor Maple, would you like to respond?
Indeed, I will. Thank you, David, for making the argument clearly for 4D. If you wanted an example of why 4D works, and you summed it up, and I wrote here, David Brake will suffer this more than any other councillor for two reasons. You look after Walderslade, and alphabetically you're ahead of G and W. Not that you're not equally as good as the other two, I'm sure. But the reality is this, that at the moment, under any other model that is likely to be credible, that will continue to happen. Those residents will be in a different council. We're bringing all of Walderslade, everything this side of the motorway, into this new authority. And let's be really clear, people aren't leaving or joining Medway the place. Medway, the authority, won't exist. KCC won't exist. Tunbridge and Malling won't exist. It will be, if I have the process correct, 4 councils. It might be 3, it might be 5, but I'm hoping it's 4. But the point you raise, and that's exactly the sort of nuance which actually our model helps with. And that does mean, sometimes things which I don't personally find wonderful, I'd rather Cuxton and Halling remained in. But actually, if you're having a process of saying we're using the motorway as the boundary, then you have to do that. There is a really nuanced piece around Bluebell Hill, which is around how they access their community. They have to come through what would be the working title I've used, North Kent Unitary Authority, to move somewhere else. So I think that's where it is different to say Cuxton and Halling or other places along the motorway. You're absolutely right as well to raise the fact that the person I was really pleased to introduce at the Labour Party conference earlier this week, Steve Reed, will be the decision maker. I had a very brief conversation with him about what's happening across our region and here in Medway. I was pleased to raise that with him in Liverpool. It's why party conferences are important, the opportunity to have those conversations. I'm sure similar conversations might be happening with opposition secretaries of state next week, or shadow, I should say. So absolutely, you are right, David, to say that the decision doesn't sit with any of the 14 councils. What will be decided is what's put forward by our region, and that's right and appropriate. And as I said earlier on, there are a number of councils who haven't decided to do their own thing, that might look at one of the options, particularly I'd say Gravesham and Dartford or Medway, and go, actually, we should support that. That time will tell in November. But you're right to say ultimately the decision maker isn't this council or any of the other 13 councils. The decision maker is the Secretary of State. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Maple.
Can I just make one final point, if I may, Vince? November is not far away. You've got the views of the people sat round the table. What I think is important, and it's been mentioned here this evening, and that is, what do the community of Medway, right across Medway, actually think? And I'm not aware that any one person, any group of people has been given the opportunity of consultation. So I think that it's important that consultation is done, and done very quickly, before you agree to spend £105,000.
I'll come back on that briefly, and Richard may want to say something on this as well. I don't want to be pedantic, not at 10:15 at night. There's a difference between engagement and formal consultation. So the government's been clear there will be formal consultation on the submitted plans next year. We will help that as well as the other, I hope the other 13 councils across the region will help that as well, but it will be central government who will be leading on that. When we were talking about priority place, that was clearly going to be the process, so it's similar to that. On an engagement perspective, as I said earlier on, some of that's being led by Canterbury. That's more around specifically the issue of local government reorganisation more generally, rather than pros and cons on specific maps. That's again something which all 14 councils are supporting, and therefore it is appropriate just to say, what's your biggest concern? What do you think is a good opportunity? What do you think? From a Medway perspective, We are, you know, I've already written out to a number of key stakeholders. Again, that's part of the reason why we're hearing that feedback back. If you're carrying out street stalls or surgeries or door knocking, you get, you know, quantifiable evidence you want to submit as part of this process. Absolutely. And really importantly, because being up late at night once a week is obviously a habit I love. Next week, Richard and I have got the next Medway Matters Live, which is legally compliant despite complaints from one councillor. And we've been really clear in all the kind of booking for that. I think over 200 have booked, so it'll be great to see people in Gillingham. We've been really clear the emphasis on that will be about local government reorganisation. So of course people can ask anything, as always, and we'll do our best to answer all questions, but very purposefully, because of the timetabling, and that's why we've done it slightly earlier in the year. It normally would be November, but we've moved it back to October, so we can hear directly, both in the sense of people's concerns, as I said to, I think, Gary's question earlier on. It will, or it might have been Elizabeth, for Medway residents in one sense, it won't feel that different compared to the rest of Kent, but it still will be different, not least because Medway Council will cease to exist along with the other 13 councils. So we're taking all of those opportunities, but actually formal consultation where, again, government will be listening to the views of all residents, but particularly from our perspective, Medway residents. That will be in the new year. And ultimately, the decision from government needs to be before the summer recess, so the 16th of July. I'm hoping it's more than a few days before that, but that's the deadline that needs to be in place for us moving forward to ultimately the timetable of shadow elections in 2027 and the vesting day. We don't have to wear a vest, I checked that, in 2028. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Councillor Medway. Just before I come to Councillor Hamilton, just one from me, Councillor Medway, talking about the government decision. Now, if the final government decision doesn't align with your preference, your full unitary model, will this cost, this 105,000 cost incurred in commissioning this separate business case, will it be viewed as a failed investment? How will you justify this to Medway residents and taxpayers?
I don't want to say that's a hypothetical question because I never say that, but it is a bit of a hypothetical question. Look, for me, look, we're going to have a plan that we'll put forward. We'll make sure through the subject to full council and cabinet, if that goes forward from us and potentially other councils as well, let's not forget, it'll be ultimately a decision maker. So if you put forward 5 plans, by the nature of this, 4 won't succeed. It may well be that the other 4 are perfectly reasonable, logical, sensible, and achievable, but when you've got 5 things and 1 future, you can only select 1. So no, I wouldn't say it would be a failure. This is an opportunity for us to put forward our case strongly. We'll be listening carefully next week, like I say, at Medway Matters Live to the public. I absolutely accept, and I think Kent leaders across all 14 councils, because of the pace of change, I think we have all been a little frustrated that we haven't had as much opportunity as we would like, which is why we've, using the existing tools we have, we've moved that forward to make that opportunity. But the formal consultation, of course, will come next year. So will it be a successful process? I hope so. Time will tell.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Okay, so I'm going to be succinct because the advice was that we would keep this to at least an hour. We haven't really done that, have we? So I'm going to start by saying I think that we are taking a very sensible, pragmatic and mature investment decision to move forward with the business case. I think that is the responsible thing to do for the residents of Medway, that we have a voice and that we are at the table, that we're not excluded. And whilst we have overplayed the opposition's soundbite tonight, I would like to emphasise that this is an investment decision that is 36 pence per resident in Medway. 36 pence. So we're looking at a business case so that we can make evidence-based decision-making, not chaos, Councillor Perfect, but perhaps you're not used to working in a fast-paced environment and you're confusing yourself. So we're here to talk about today's communities, who we are today, not who we were 50 years ago, where we're going tomorrow, and we're investing 36p per resident in order to make evidence-based decision-making for the future of everybody here in Medway. So the call-in was premature. Scrutiny should come on once the business case is finished, not before it's even written. Let's move on.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Printer.
Yeah, thank you. One reason I hate council meetings sometimes is that everyone decides to come on and repeat everything that's already been said. But I feel the need to come in and do that, unfortunately. It is a lot of money, yes. But with that sort of thinking, what do? Do we stop doing anything? Do we stop doing any services? Do we stop investing in anything for the future? This programme is part of a central government programme. The last time it happened, I wasn't even born. And if this programme goes ahead on the same timetable as the last programme, I will probably be dead. So do we not want to have all the information for an investment of 105? It is a lot of money. But on the grand scheme of things, as a budget, it's not a lot of money to have all the real points that we need to build a business case to be able to examine, then properly scrutinise that case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Printer. Councillor MacDonald.
I will be succinct, Chair, because I was the one that's been moaning all night to go home. But I needed to come back on a couple of points. I think the first point is that I find it, I'm not going to go off of agenda too much, but I find it absolutely appalling for those opposite to talk about missing lines on finances and accounts and that money spent without consultation, when you had loads of that in the last administration, loads of, and Councillor Brake, you talk about us dipping into the reserves. I'm not sure when you last looked at the accounts, so a lot of them, most of them reserves were spent before we come into administration here. So, but just moving on, thank you, Councillor Perfect. I always appreciate you telling me that I'm misguided. I wasn't misguided. I wasn't saying it was totally owned by Medway, right? What I said to you was that Medway is my focus because the residents are the ones that voted me in and voted us all in, that sit in council, and you are dedicated to your area as well. I'm going to compliment you, you are. But of course I care about regional, collaboration. Of course we do. But I'm not going to, we can't sit around waiting around for other Kent leaders and everyone else to decide, wait around patiently for them to decide how they're going to shape our future for us. Why should we? We're not going to do that. And this bit of money we're spending, Councillor Brake saying, how do we know? It's because the reason time is ticking by is because you're delaying the process. Here we are again. Instead of getting on with it, getting on with the business plan and getting on with what we need to do and speak to residents, we're having call-ins like here till 11:15 at night. Finally, I will pay compliments to our unitary authority here. I believe we've got the expertise, we've got the legislative mandate, and we've got the experience as a good unitary authority in Kent, and we should all be proud of that. We shouldn't be criticising it and waiting for others to tell us what's better. We have the expertise here. We've got the officers and the experience of what a unitary authority can do well. And I believe that's what we should be doing well, and we should be telling the others, not waiting for them to tell us, telling the others how to run a good authority in the way we have done over the years. I think we should just go to the vote now, if we can, please, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Turpin.
Apologies, I know I have spoken already this evening, so I'll try and be quick. I think, the finances of all this is really what we're here about because, the number of times we've said £105,000 tonight, we're probably getting up to that figure. It's important and we have to be mindful of not wasting money. I think what I'd like to understand again a bit more of the process, if maybe Councillor Mapley can explain it, is are we going to be spending this money on proving the 4D, the business case, or is it a possibility, I think, which you possibly suggested, that it could evolve from that, putting that business case? So are we going to be, are we going to sort of spend that money to make sure that the business case fits what we're saying here, or yeah, can it change based on what we find out? You know, and I'd just like to have a caveat that I don't necessarily support LGR, but we are where we are through democracy. I think we could be spending, you know, on a national level, it's going to be huge if we're talking about 105,000 tonight on this one little bit. And I think we could be putting this money elsewhere. But, you know, I'm slightly sort of disturbed by some of the comments this evening with regards to this funding. And if we think about sort of 20 million on infrastructure on the peninsula, which didn't even get a spade in the ground, and similar sort of levels on Innovation Park Medway, which didn't go very far, then yes, yeah. What is it, the pot and kettle and things, but not that I want to give you fuel for your arguments, of course. But yeah, if you could just explain a little bit more on whether it can evolve and whether we're in strict map. Thank you.
Councillor Medway.
Somebody over there stole my line that I was literally about to use. So I'm really grateful to Paula for highlighting, you know, this sum of money, 36 pence per resident. It is cheaper than the Japanese roundabout in Gillingham. Let's remind ourselves of that as well. So it's all about context. Moving, and of course, you know, our finances would be better if we hadn't had a 91% cut in our revenue support grant since 2010. But moving to Elizabeth's really helpful question. So yeah, and Richard and Bapinda may want to comment on this as well. They may not want to, I don't know. So we will be going to, you know, subject to the process. So if no further action is taken tonight, we will be going to KPMG to seek their advice and guidance in support in building the business plan to bring forward an option effectively initially to our council meeting, but also will be available we'll make it readily available to the other 13 as well. Where there may be nuance, and I think this is really important, although it's a quick timetable, there will still be enough flexibility in that conversation, that timescale, that what 4D was brought forward to just then, as others have said, to ignore conversations that basically are forming up the next, including conversations from people who represent some of those areas, etc. So we want to hear that as well. We've already started those listening processes. So this is where it's the concept and the final outcome. The concept is for unitary authorities recognising that to be fit for the next 50 years, you may not necessarily be using existing district borough unitary boundaries. That will remain. There may be slight nuance between where we're sat here today and certainly what is presented to full council and cabinet is that if we were just to ignore any conversations, and I use Faversham as a good example, it may be that the Faversham which is currently facing to mid may face to east, for example. And again, we'll work with KPMG and others, and we'll be listening carefully to those important stakeholders on that. So that's where there may be nuance between where we are today and where we get to when we have a full council and cabinet meeting. And if colleagues have got thoughts on that, and they want to feed that into the mix, that will be fine as well. Now, of course, by the nature of this, we've effectively got just about a month to basically get this work done. So don't leave it long if you want to be speaking to me and officers about this. But I say KPMG will be doing the lion's share of that work. If there is a requirement for any very specialist nuanced areas, that's why the Cabinet report recommendation has that in there. I'm not sure whether we'll need to use that or not, but again, that will be within the existing budget we have available. Richard may want to say just a little more on that, perhaps.
Richard.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and I will be brief, members, conscious of the mood in the room. Could I just say the process that government have set out requires business cases to be developed. So directly to answer Liz's point, we are required to submit a business case that underpins whatever options are being put forward. And we are calling on KPMG to undertake that work. Given the experience they have, they are working with about half of the areas that are going forward through this process, and they have significant experience of the process that needs to be gone through, hence us wanting to commit this funding to bring them on board to undertake that work. Just to pick up a wider point, we are doing that in collaboration with all of the other local authorities. I have been very clear. I meet with chief executives of all the other 13 councils on a weekly basis every Friday morning. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, I'll be on that call. And I've been very clear throughout that whilst 4D is the model that is being proposed, we are absolutely working with other authorities across the county, because actually it is really important for the reasons that David outlined, the reasons that Dan outlined. We have a lot of experience of being a unitary authority. We need to be part of those discussions. Whatever option is finally going to go forward, we've got to be part of those discussions, and we have committed to that. We are very much still working in collaboration with those other local authorities. So, Liz, that's the direct answer to your question. We're required to produce that business case. There will be some refinements that are possible through that process, and I think that would only improve the proposals that are put forward as well, and that will be reflecting some of the conversations that are taking place. Just to finally round out those points that Vince alluded to earlier, distinctions between engagement and consultation. Government will be undertaking that formal consultation, as the leader said. That will start in the new year. That will conclude by May to then inform the decision that government will take before the summer recess, as Vince has outlined. There is this county-wide survey that Canterbury have been leading on. It's actually going to, there's a link into it that will go out in the Friday email to members tomorrow, just so there's an awareness of that. That's something that's being undertaken across the county. And as Vince has said, we have been very clear. 234 people have signed up for Medway Matters Live next week. Local government reorganisation will feature as a big part of that discussion, and that will be a further opportunity for people to give their views. My final point, Chairperson, is that myself, all of my members of CMT, Corporate Management Team, when we are speaking with our partners, we are talking to them about the LGR proposals and how that will impact on their services. I was speaking to the Chief Executive of Medway Hospital just earlier this week about that very issue. So that engagement will continue. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Richie. We have got a couple of potential proposal. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think based on the conversation, and thank you to the leader for coming along and taking those questions. I think he has been very open and transparent in fairness to him, and thank you to the Chief Executive as well for taking the questions. I think as Councillor Brake has just referenced, I too share Councillor Brake's concerns here, and I don't have satisfaction that using £105,000 worth of borrowed money, as Councillor Turpin's just outlined, is a good use of taxpayer funds, and therefore I think that this should be sent back to Cabinet with a recommendation, particularly around the first point in Appendix C, is discussed once again with the Cabinet at a meeting to be held in due course. I'd like to make that proposal, please, Chairperson. Thank you. Sorry, Chairperson. I think also I would like to make a recorded vote recommendation, which I understand is 4 members. So,
yes, that's right. If 4 members wish to have a recorded vote.
Thank you. We do, Councillor Brake. I don't know if the microphone was on, Councillor Brake.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, members. The motion is to refer, the committee's asked to refer the Cabinet decisions back to Cabinet for reconsideration. That is the motion. So I will take a roll call. So I'd be grateful if members could indicate whether they're for, against or abstain. I'll start with Councillor Anna Mashan. Okay. Councillor Bowen. Councillor Brake. Councillor Finch. Councillor Hackwell. Councillor Hamilton. Against. Councillor Jones. Against. Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Nestroff.
Against.
Councillor Perfect. Councillor Prenter. Chairperson.
For.
And Councillor Turpin. Okay, so that motion is lost.
Councillor MacDonald.
I'd like to make a proposal, please, for our side, and that is, the proposal is we agree with the Cabinet decision, and we move on now, please. And that's my proposal. Has anyone seconded it my side? That'd be great.
Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Agreed? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That brings us to the close of the meeting. Thank you.